parishioner a couple of weeks ago a little bit of this story, but several years ago when I was a cadet in college, I can remember going through all my training, and one of the people you never forget is your drill instructor. You'll never forget him, nor the voice that's in your ear. It's probably why I'm part deaf now, because Sergeant Cummings was his name, and oh, he loved to yell at me. Or at least it felt like it. I know he was yelling at everybody, but boy, it certainly seems personal when he's yelling at you. And he would be on the side of my ear screaming at me while I'm marching. It reminded me of Gomer Pyle and Sergeant Carter, you know, just sitting there screaming away. And I will never forget the words in my head is, Tuberville, I want to hear those heels click, 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 as I'm marching. And he went on to teach me a lot, and I thought for a long time he was the meanest guy I ever met. He was about 4'9", looked like a bulldog, and was not nearly as meaner than a bulldog. I mean, the guy was tough. But I also learned a lot about him, and he taught me how to shoot and all these other different skills. But what he really taught me was to listen carefully to authority, to listen very carefully to authority. And as well as, when you have authority, you have responsibility. For Sergeant Cummings, he wanted to make sure that I would become a good officer, as well as giving me the skills that, God forbid I go to war, I would come back as safe as I could. And I appreciate that. And I look back at it and I appreciate him. But even tougher in my life was the nun, Sister Helen, that I've told you about. Who, yes, I was actually more scared of Sister Helen than I was Sergeant Cummings. But when I did my clinicals, my pastoral education in Charleston, South Carolina, she was a tough one. Very tough. And she's the one that I told you about one time that I did not listen to her careful instructions. And when I didn't, on Monday morning, she chewed me out and belittled me in front of my 9 colleagues, where all these adults kind of stepped back and let me just sit there as she screamed and yelled at me. I kept looking at her hand to make sure there wasn't a ruler, because I thought for sure she'd beat me with it. But she was so upset. But it's because I didn't listen to her. I didn't listen to the following instructions. And again, what Sister Helen taught me was to listen carefully when someone has authority with you, as well as when you have authority, you have great responsibility. Again, what she wanted to do is, she wasn't mean. She came to be somebody who I absolutely love and I admire to this day. But she wanted to teach me to be the best priest I possibly can. She also was teaching me to listen to my parishioners when they come to me and they're hurting, that you need to listen to every detail of that. She also taught me that when you have authority, you have responsibility to all of the people that you serve. And I will never forget her for it. We're seeing a little bit of this today in the gospel. We're seeing this centurion. Centurion would be a kind of a mid-officer. He would be about a captain or a major in today's military. He has quite a few troops that are with him, and he has a great responsibility. Obviously, he listens to his authority. And in the Roman army, I can promise you, he listened very carefully, because you didn't want to mess up to be in that position. But his job was to take care of Capernaum and to make sure that that area was secure, that it was protected, as well as they would have been the police that were in, making sure that the laws were being abided, and that they were listening to the Roman laws that were there, as well as the Jewish laws. And so he would have had an incredible position. But where he stands out is apparently he's rather a good person. We will hear later in the story that he apparently loves the Jewish people. He loved, I guess, living in Capernaum. Now, we have to read between the lines here, but something is pretty incredible with this guy. And that is, he must have been listening, whether he's listening to Torah or he's listening as they're reading. Something is inspiring him to really care for the Jewish people. It could have been being from Rome and you have so many different gods, that maybe he liked the idea of the one God. And he's the God who's made everything. Maybe listening to the stories of Elijah, listening to Moses, listening to the different prophets, grabbed his attention enough that he loves the people and he works for them and he takes care of them. So much he even builds a synagogue for them. And so, one day we find out his slave is sick and actually to the brink of death. Now in Jesus' day, there were all kinds of different slaves. People were taken in battle, people were taken through different business deals, etc., from all over the world. And so you could have slaves who actually work in the field to those who were advisors to you, depending on their particular skill. And it sounds like this centurion, we're going to call him Joe. Joe is very, very close to this slave. And he's very upset that he's dying. Now again, this brings up more questions than almost answers. But how does he know about Jesus? Somehow he knows about Jesus, whether he's listened to this rabbi when he's out there, or if he has watched Jesus as he has healed people, or if people have been talking about Jesus. All we know is he has this deep belief in this rabbi of who Jesus really is. And so he sends some, not his soldiers, but he actually sends some Jewish elders to go and talk to him. And so they come to Jesus and they tell Jesus, listen, this centurion, this guy needs your help. His slave is dying and he needs you to come and save him. But he goes on to say, listen, this is the guy you want to help. He's been so good to us. He even built our synagogue. Now what I think Jesus is hearing is not, oh, he gives a lot, so therefore let me go and take care of him. I think what he's really hearing is, he is living into my ministry, loving my neighbor as myself. And so he's intrigued, and he goes. And so just before they get to the house, the centurion, Joe, finds out about it, and he decides to get another group to go and stop Jesus. And there he tells Jesus, or through this group, listen, I didn't mean for you to come to my home. I am not even worthy to have you under my roof. He says, just say the word. Just say the word and he will be healed. But then he also says something incredible. He says, you know, I also am under great authority. And when I tell soldiers to move right, they move right. If I tell them to go left, they go left. If I tell a slave to do something, they do it. And Jesus hears these words, and he looks around at the people, and he says, not even in Israel have I ever heard such faith. You see, what he's telling Jesus is that I too am under authority. He's saying, Jesus, I know you're under the authority of God himself. I know who you are. This is a person who is a Roman. He's outside of the circle. He is a Gentile. And yet somehow he knows God, and he knows that Jesus has been sent by God himself, and that he can do whatever he wants. He's also telling Jesus, I have great authority here in Capernaum, but you have even greater authority over me. And Jesus is so pleased to hear this kind of faith that when this group, by the time they get back home, the slave is fine. He knows what authority is. He knows to listen to authority as he listens to Jesus. But he also knows with authority comes great responsibility. My question for you today is, do you understand where Jesus, what kind of authority he has? Do you really understand and have faith in Jesus Christ? Do you realize the authority he had as he's on the earth, and when he goes back, he sends the Holy Spirit to give authority? Do you understand that authority is inside of you? As children of God, you have authority. But with that authority comes responsibility. You see, the centurion actually teaches us this morning what that means. You see what else the centurion did? He was a voice for the voiceless. He spoke on behalf of the slave who would have had no voice, because he felt through Jesus Christ he had responsibility towards him. My real question for you this morning is, are you a voice? Are you a voice for those who don't have a voice? Think about it. If you are children of God, and you are, through Jesus Christ, then you have authority. And with that authority, you have responsibility. And one of those responsibilities is to be a voice to those who are voiceless in this world. Now, I'm not talking about just people who may be young or poor that don't have a voice. I am, but they're not the only ones. But what about those who don't know how to articulate what's really going on in their life? In other words, what I really mean is we need to be a voice to those who are poor. We need to put clothes on children who don't have anything, or shoes on them. That's why we take care of food pantries to give food to those who are hungry. But what about children who can't read or have math issues, and how we can help them by sitting with them? Or how about your neighbor who's having marriage issues and doesn't know how to speak about it? We should be responsible and help and listen, as Sister Helen taught me. Actually, listening to people is also being a voice to the voiceless. Those who are saying there's something missing in my life. I know there's got to be more to life than this. Have you told them your story? Have you told them about Jesus Christ? Have you invited them to church? By doing that, guess what? You're being the voice to the voiceless. Those who are in the hospital, or those who are hurt, those who are depressed, those who are hurting, by praying for them, you are being a voice to the voiceless. I think about my wife Karen and the work that she's done with so many of her colleagues over the years of helping children with different learning disabilities and other issues, of giving them the best opportunity for education, whether they're blind, deaf, learning disabled, dyslexic, they can't walk, whatever it is, of trying to get them on an even playing field. And in doing so, even having laws changed over the years so that we're starting to see things differently. That is a voice for the voiceless. For the voiceless. This weekend, we're remembering men and women who have died to give freedom to others. They too were a voice for the voiceless. As children of God, we are given authority through the Holy Spirit. The disciples found that out on Pentecost when they went from disciples to apostles. They learned that they have a great responsibility to the world. And so do you. And as we continue on each Sunday of talking about what it is that we're supposed to do as a church and as individuals, I want you to truly pray and ask God, what is your responsibility? Who are you supposed to be a voice for? And we should all move forward. What I want people to see when they see you is a true voice. What I want them to do is look at you and say, here comes Martha Ray. I know that's a generational thing, right? So I'm some people, who? But I want people to see you when you walk down saying, here comes the big mouth. Amen.